Hi guys, I am so excited to introduce you guys to Emily Henry. I have been a big fan. I have actually been a fan of your YA books too. So I've been reading you for quite a while. I loved Beach Read, fell in love with every single character in that book. And I absolutely love this book. I mean, it made me want to, pick up and just go on vacation.
Good.
Yeah,
So-
and Emily, my name is Samantha. I don't think we've had a chance to communicate yet, but I work at A Great Good Place with Kathleen, and I'm delighted to meet you. Thank you so much for doing an event with us.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I'm hoping that this Wi-Fi holds up, but if you're having issues hearing me, I might have to hop on and use my phone, but we'll try this first.
Okay, so far so good.
Okay, good.
So far so good. So we were on a few minutes before you joined us, and we had already begun talking about how great your book was. And where we started, which I would love you to just to jump right in, just as your dialogue. And it was one of the things that many comments on the book actually talk about that. And if you could talk a little bit about how you write that in and make it so authentic and juicy and all that.
Yeah, first of all, thank you. I mean, that's always just like the ultimate compliment and makes me feel so happy. I feel like dialogue is pretty much the only thing that comes naturally to me in writing. So it's not like a great accomplishment necessarily, but it still makes me feel really good. It's the thing that just happens really naturally. So I've lately been getting asked more about it, mostly from like aspiring writers, and have been trying to figure out how to give advice, which is really tricky when you're just like, this is the thing that I know how to do and I don't know why I know how to do it. But I think what I've realized is so much of writing dialogue, the fun way and the juicy way, like you were saying, is not thinking of a conversation as like characters just like passing a baton back and forth. I think when you read dialogue that's kind of just being used as like exposition or whatever, you can tell that's what's happening because it's just sort of like this conversation is following this very neat line where it's like, that this is being used to communicate information. And when I write dialogue, it's very rarely being used to communicate anything like at all. I mean, it really is why it's so fun to write, is it's just character building for me. And then often that means, in the editing process, I have to cut out a ton that's just doing nothing except making me laugh. But I think, it's just the best thing, like when it's really happening, but sometimes it's not. And I, am just kind of blocked up. And I've started to realize, like I was saying, that like, you can't go about it thinking of it as this like neat and tidy pass off of information where it's like, I ask you this question and then you just answer this question and whatever. And so I have realized like the way that I really think about dialogue is like this tennis match where, when it's feeling really good, each character is just sort of like setting the other one up for success, like over and over again in a way where it's like, we're good at this together. And then, when it's like really awkward or just, when it becomes a fight, whatever, just thinking of it more as this thing that holds a lot of tension and that you're not just traveling on this straight line, you're sort of like either engaging in this like push and pull where it's like somebody lobs something to one character and then that character can take it like even further. And so I think in trying to like, sort of quantify what's going on and talk to other writers who are thinking a lot about their dialogue, I always just say like, watch a lot of TV, which is good advice in general. I feel like watching TV, it's just like nothing is better for your dialogue than watching a lot of TV, especially like if you want to watch like, Gilmore Girls or West Wing or something that has that really like rapid fire energy to it. I think that the more you watch that, the more that's sort of how your brain works anyway. But then the other thing, like I said, is just like, thinking, don't think of these characters engaging where it's like, I'm giving you exactly what you need. And then you're passing back the correct information. It's like, it really needs to feel like a game where it's like, I just keep kind of going back to the tennis match, which is funny because I do not.
Oh no.
Person. But yeah, so it's like looking for that element of surprise. Like if somebody makes a joke, like taking that joke even further, or like engaging with that, and like playing along. So I don't know if that even is really an answer to your question, but I think it's really just like the thing that is the most fun to write. It's like you get to have all of these imaginary conversations with yourself. And I don't really write dialogue when I'm not like feeling it. Like I was saying, it's like I've been thinking about these ways to sort of codify my process, but overall it's really just like I'm either in the zone for writing dialogue or I'm not. And another thing like I've realized with help from other writer friends is if I'm not, a really great way to figure that out is to put two characters into conflict, and immediately, you know, set them up into like an argument or just like having different needs and different desires. And that's like a really good way to keep it from feeling like that little tiny baton pass. Like you don't want that. You want them pushing, pulling, or like, you know, kind of outdoing each other.
That's a very I'm not a writer, but I love that idea as a way to sort of push the parameters of it. I think that's very, very cool.
So Emily, I wanted to tell you that People We Meet on Vacation was the #1 book last week at GGP.
Wow, that's amazing. Thank you so much for doing such a good job selling my book.
Well, we had a really good time selling Beach Read too. That's a wonderful book.
Thank you.
But what inspired Poppy and Alex? Because they're just such likable characters.
Thank you. It's funny because I've kind of talked about this a little bit. So anybody who's in here and who's heard other interviews, forgive it, the repetition you might hear. But it's funny, I really expected people to find Poppy very grating. And I've been very pleasantly surprised and just delighted that people like her as much as I like her. Because I think she's like sort of an acquired taste. But that actually was like the starting point. Was I knew I wanted to play with that similar dynamic from When Harry Met Sally. And when I pitched the book, I specifically was talking to my agent about the concept of it being sort of a gender swapped When Harry Met Sally. And I don't know how clear that was in anyone else's mind, but what that meant to me was I wanted Poppy to be the one who sort of takes life a little bit more, with like a little bit more carefree approach, and she just doesn't take herself so seriously. And, you know, like in that first ride home scene with Harry and Sally, like Harry minutes before has been like making out with his girlfriend, who I think is like a friend of Sally's. I don't remember how they get set up, but then he's kind of like flirting with Sally on the ride home, and she's like very offended by this and is just sort of like, what's wrong with you? Like, why are you so like casual in your approach to like relationships? And then of course, you know, like we get to see Harry develop and be more complex than that. But I wanted to have my female lead be a character who is a little bit grating in some ways, like Harry, just sort of like very jokey and like, you know, just doesn't take herself seriously, even in times when maybe she should be taking herself more seriously. And then also to have this kind of approach to life where she sort of isn't engaging with it all that deeply, where she's sort of like, I'm, you know, here for these experiences, and I want to see as much of the world as I can, and I want to meet as many people as I can. And even kind of the way she approaches her romantic life is in a way, you know, she has this like carefree vibe, but in a way it's very clinical, because when she meets, you know, men that she's interested in, it's sort of just like, oh, this could be fun for a while. Whereas with Alex, he's someone who really craves that like stability and romance and attachment. And from the very beginning, that's sort of more his speed. So it really was like that. The very first kernel was just of their characters was a reversed Harry and Sally. And for some reason, just instantly when I wrote the first scene, I knew the characters so well, even though they're not really like Harry or Sally. I just knew like the core of Harry and Sally. I wanted to feel sort of similar.
Oh, nice.
If you see me looking down, I'm monitoring the Facebook Live as we're on Zoom.
You're texting.
I actually am texting people who are saying hi, welcoming them and stuff. So I just don't want you to think I was ignoring you. I'm totally on board.
So Emily,
you know, one of the things.
Oh, go ahead.
One of the things that I felt that Alex fell in love with her from the minute she sat in that car and started rifling through his tape deck, because she had the audacity to just call him on everything,
Yeah.
because he's so anal.
He's so anal. I love him so much. He's like just the most uptight character I've ever written by far.
But you love him the minute, because he's kind of like, I love the fact that he buys 5 pairs of pants because he hates shopping.
Yes.
And I mean, I think we all have someone in our lives that does that.
Yeah.
You
Yeah,
know?
for sure. Or like they find the one thing that they like, and it's not like this very specific, interesting thing. They're just like, oh, it is this specific button-up shirt, and I buy them in bulk, because what if they stop making it someday?
Right. Well, one thing it's funny, it didn't jump out at me until I was having a conversation with a girlfriend, and she was remembering things around her feelings about her parents and her mother, and this sort of awkwardness and like wanting people to like, and all of a sudden I was thinking about Poppy's family, and it just brought that whole piece forward for me. And so I would love you to talk a little bit more, like, is that something that just, how did that evolve? Is that something you had experience with, like that, sometimes that feeling we have about it, we love our families, but they're kind of embarrassing or really embarrassing, you know? So I just thought that was a beautiful detail, and I'd love you to talk about that a little bit.
Thank you so much. It's really made me so happy how many people have connected with that element, and even just with like Poppy's family in general. It's so weird, because this book, writing it, like I said, it's like I had all these individual pieces, but when I wrote that first scene, which is it is the final like version first scene of the book, that was the first scene that I wrote, the like 5 years previous bar scene. When I wrote that scene, it was just so weird how much clicked into place. But at that point, I didn't know anything about Poppy or Alex's families. I just knew their personalities. And then as I was writing, and I did largely write in the order that the book is published. So as I was writing, it was really interesting, because I don't normally know my characters that well in a first draft. It's like I write the first draft, and by the end, I figure out what's important to them, and then I have to rewrite the book to like reflect that character. But with this one, it was really weird, because as soon as Poppy and Alex, or as soon as Poppy's family was on page, as soon as I got to a scene where it's like, oh, okay, well, we're gonna have Poppy's family, it was just like at that point I suddenly knew them. And so then I was able to go back and, you know, thread those details through earlier, but it was so strange how instantly I knew them. And I also didn't even realize until later on that they weren't based on my family, but I realized later on in maybe the editing process, or it actually might have been when I was writing that scene with the condom box, which is my favorite scene I've ever written, probably. In that moment, suddenly I saw these characters and exactly kind of like transposed one of my close friends growing up and her parents, who are just like so sweet and lovely, and like just so delighted by her. Like everything she does, they just think she's hysterically funny. And even in the last few years, there have been times where she and I have like driven to visit her mom at work, just like while her mom's, you know, at the like bird shop where she works, and just like watching her mom just be like laughing so hard she's almost crying by things that her daughter is saying. It's just like the sweetest thing in the entire world to just be like, you've known this person for her entire life, and you still think she's just like the smartest, like funniest, brightest, you know, thing in the sky. And I just, yeah, I didn't know that that's who I was kind of pulling from until they just showed up on page, and I was watching that whole scene play out and could exactly picture these people that I know in my real life. I don't think that friend has that specific, I'm trying to think if she's, I'll just say her name, and you can text her and ask her. I don't know that she's ever expressed that sort of embarrassment, but I think it is a common thing when you're really close with your family and you're like a young adult, like whether that's a teenager or like early 20s. I think that's a really common thing where it's like, if you're close with your family, you really love them and you know what they bring out in you, and you have fun with them, but you still have this sense as you kind of start growing up and splitting away a little bit, where you realize you are not one person. and you are, you know, whoever's around you brings out a different side of you. And I think, you know, that's a really familiar thing to anyone. And I don't remember feeling like specifically, I mean, I was embarrassed of my family in the way that like any sour, moody teenager is embarrassed of her family. But I don't think I ever had that specific, like, I am very protective of these people and I really love them. And, you know, but also like, what if people don't get them? I never had it as strong as Poppy did, but I do think that's just a really natural course of things. I mean, even right now, it's like, I'm actually traveling and my husband's in the room, and I was like, could you put on headphones and listen to music, which he's probably just pretending to do right now, because I have to come be like professional Emily. And there is like this weird divide where you're like, what if you don't, you know, what if you don't like this version of me? And I think for Poppy, it's like she loves her family so much and she really feels like herself when she's with them. But when she meets Alex, she's in this part of her life where she's trying so hard to differentiate herself from those past versions of her, especially just because she had, you know, kind of like rough,
Right.
childhood, like not with her family, like her family life was great, but she was judged in the past by her family and their quirks, and she loves those people, and, you know, it's just a weird balancing act of like loving someone while knowing not everyone gets it. And I think even, you know, I'm very, very, very close with my siblings-in-law. And my brother and sister-in-law just moved back to the same city that we live in, and, you know, kind of trying to integrate them into my existing like group of friends. And I think there is that fear even now when we're all like full grown adults of just like everybody like them, everybody be nice. Like what if they don't, you know, just wanting everybody to like get along, and just feeling like very protective of your people. So I don't really know how that worked in, but like I said, this is just it's the one in a million book for me where I just knew the character is better than, I mean, I just turned in what I can't say too much about, but my next book, and it's like, I didn't know the characters until the last draft. I was just working so hard and having to actively like mind them. But with Poppy and Alex, it was just like, of course, these two people came from these two distinct family types.
Yeah. Love that. Thank you.
Thanks for the question.
Yeah.
Well, and I love the fact that Alex is so detached from being an emotional person, because he doesn't have that. He didn't have the mother, and he always had to be the kind of staid member of his family that kind of held them all up.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, I just thought Alex was pretty brilliant, and I love the sad puppy face. I kind of want to see it.
I can't do it. I don't have the right face. I do feel like maybe we should do like an Instagram call out for like people to submit what they picture as the sad puppy face.
That would be awesome.
Yeah.
You've all heard it here first, people. Start doing your Instagram posts. I love that. Definitely.
We'd love to see it. Tag Great Good Place for Books.
Yeah.
And tag me, and we'll see your sad puppy faces.
I would love to see that.
Yeah. That's a good one.
I mean, I can honestly say this is a book that I can put just at about, I've put it in so many hands just telling them that it is the perfect summer read.
Oh, thank you so much. That makes
I mean, it's just everything we missed last year.
Yeah. That's the really surreal thing was I wrote this book right before the pandemic, and did not know that it would be coming out in this world. And I just feel like the timing is this weird serendipitous thing where we're all just starting to feel safe doing things again. And we were kind of worried this book was going to come out and there'd be like another 4 years of like being in lockdown at home. And then I think it would just be like, even though it's nice armchair travel, I think it would be excruciating to read a book like that, thinking like, I have no idea if I can ever travel again.
Yeah.
Well, my favorite trips were when they traveled on the cheap.
Yeah. I think, that was a fun thing about writing the book was that I really thought when I pitched it to my editor, I thought that I was doing this like aspirational, summer read where it was like, I wanted it to feel like glossy and fun and, dreamy trips and all of this stuff. And that's how I pictured it in my head. But as I started writing the book, I realized that the things that I was excited to write were all things going wrong. And I kind of realized in that process, like, oh, when I look back on my favorite trips, like the memories that really stand out to me are all the things that went really wrong. Because if you're with the right person, then that stuff just becomes hilarious and you talk about it for the rest of your life. Like every few years, you kind of pull those memories out and the stories get a little bit more exaggerated until you really don't know exactly how it actually happened. And in writing the book, it really felt like that, like, you know, in crafting their inside jokes that kind of run across years, but also just in setting them up for like all of this failure on their trips, like just things going wrong. And of course, the things that go right that are fun surprises too. But I think you just learn so much about a person when you're in those scenarios, and you really figure out how well you mesh when you see how you deal with traveling while together.
Well, I just remembered, which vacation was it where the guy, is it the photographer who just
Yes.
won't leave them alone?
Yes.
That poor guy, he was just always right there, like, what are we doing now? And they're like,
Yeah.
oh my God.
Which I kind of feel like everybody has sort of had a coworker like that who you're like, he's really nice.
Right. We don't want to hurt his feelings.
Yeah, he will not ever leave me alone. Like he will be talking to me, or like, you know, she'll be talking to me through the bathroom stall. Like, just like, I don't want to have this conversation right now.
So one of my questions is, have you been to all the places that you wrote about?
Yeah. I have been, I mean, all the trips were pretty much pulled from, you know, details were pulled from real trips I've taken. The one exception was I haven't been to Palm Springs since I was a very little kid, and I fully expected to be able to go back during the editing process and just kind of like compare everything I had learned from online to what it was actually like in real life. And then of course COVID hit and that was not an option. But my audiobook narrator, Julia Whalen, actually like lives at least part-time in Palm Springs. And so when she started recording the book, she sent me an Instagram message and was like, oh my gosh, when I saw that they were going to Palm Springs in the summer, I just thought, I really hope she like did her research basically and knows how hot it is. And she was very relieved to find that I understood that Palm Springs in the summer is brutal if you don't have access to a good swimming pool. So all those little details I did not experience, but I did read about all that online. And there really is like a carousel that closes down in the summer because the metal gets too hot, and like botanical gardens that are only open from like 7 a.m. to 11 a.m. or something like that because it's just too dangerous.
Well, and we all have been to at least one wedding where they were like, we're going to get married here in the hot. And you're like, why? Like, what are you doing? They just like,
and they're like, and also you're in the wedding and you'll be wearing a turtleneck dress. And we're all getting professional makeup that's like 6 inches thick.
I have to tell you, when my oldest sister got married, she got married in October here, but it turned out it was the year that we had the huge heat wave.
Oh no.
So we were all in long blue sleeved bridesmaids dresses. And then the air conditioner went out in the church. It was just like, I was reading some of those scenes and I was laughing because I was totally remembering that.
In there.
I actually got an Instagram message also from a reader who said that their air conditioning was struggling to keep up. I wonder if they're in the Pacific Northwest where it's like so wildly hot. They said their AC was struggling and they decided to try the going down 1 degree at a time, and it worked for them. And I was really amazed because that actually is based on my existing air conditioning in my home. And it did for like a full year. That trick worked before the AC was like, okay, you weren't supposed to find a workaround. We are in need of some new parts. But that was a real thing that we like kind of figured out by trial and error. It was like, if we turned it down more than 1 degree, it would shoot up. And if you turn it down 1 degree, it'll like go down there.
Slowly do it. That is very funny. We'll all remember that for the next time. So I did want to encourage our audience. If you want to ask Emily any questions, you can put them in the chat here.
I actually have a question on Facebook right now. It's from Sherry Brown, and Sherry's joining us from, oh my goodness, I know she told me. Indiana.
Yay.
Hi, Sherry.
And she wanted to know, Emily, if you could be one of your characters for a week, who would you choose?
Oh my
What a fun
gosh.
question.
That is a fun question. I mean, I think Poppy existing outside of COVID times, like I feel like you'd have to go with Poppy because you just can go anywhere you want to for free. Like it'd be hard to top that. I wouldn't really choose January because I feel like that life is just like my existing life pretty much. So, and you know, same thing for Gus. Like he's not doing anything very different from what I'm doing. So I think I'm trying to think if there's anybody who has like a more fun life that's like a side character that I could pop in. But I think Poppy, like that would be just very cool for 1 week. I do not want to be a full-time travel writer.
Poppy?
But 1 week,
Right.
I'd do it.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, one of the things that I liked, I mean, going back to your beach read is I was trying to figure out who you based Gus on. So can I ask for that spoiler?
You can. I don't usually really base characters on specific people. However, I do think that Gus is sort of like a young Mark Ruffalo type. And so whenever people ask me to like cast the movies, I always am just like, it'd have to be like someone who's sort of like young Mark Ruffalo. They wouldn't let us cast him now. I don't think he's about 25 years too old for but I see, yes, young Mark. That's kind of the vibe.
Nice. That's a good one. That's a really good one. Oh, so, okay. Well, now that you've introduced this, who do you imagine for Poppy and Alex?
Oh my gosh. It's so hard. I always say, whenever I ask people to share like their fan casts with me, which participants feel free to do so.
Oh,
if you
yes, chime in.
Yeah. Whenever I ask for suggestions, I always just say like, I don't really need them to look anything like I describe the characters. I just want people who could like play it off, who could make that chemistry happen. Somebody says Anna de Armas for Poppy, and I really like that. The only reason I hesitate to cast her as my Poppy is because I think she would be such a good January. For Poppy, I have been saying, when people ask, but it's not who I pictured, whatever, Mae Whitman or Jane Levy, who are both like young, small, bubbly actresses.
Or Rachel Brosnahan, or who plays
Oh
Miss
yeah, Rachel
Frizzell?
Brosnahan. She's great.
She's dynamite. Yeah.
And she could definitely be Poppy because I think she's kind of got that, like I find her very funny and lovable, but I imagine plenty of people find her grating, which is Poppy.
You do want to keep that element of Poppy.
Yeah. Yes. I'm trying to think who else. And then I have truly no real, I just didn't have anyone in mind. Some people have said for Alex, one person that has come up a couple of times who looks nothing like I described Alex, but who I think would really fit is Dev Patel. I think Dev Patel would be able to do like the very quiet, serious, but like secretly very handsome man. And I really
Somebody
have liked
said Logan Lerman.
Yeah.
Great.
People say him a lot for Gus too, which I think in my mind, I think that he's younger than he actually is, because every time people say that, I'm like, is he an adult? But people will always tell me that his hair has started going gray. And so
mother know where he is. What's he doing?
Yeah, like I think the last thing I saw him in was the like Rick Riordan, like the Lightning Thief movie, if that's even him.
Well, you know, he did that really great the great Nazi Hunter show on Amazon recently.
Yeah, I haven't watched that yet.
Oh
but
my
I've
God, it's so good. I binged it.
Cool.
I watched it in like 3 days.
Cool. I need a new. I
hate it when I do that.
I know.
Because you're sad it's over and you don't.
Oh God, I hate that. I'm doing it with somebody who does something right now.
I'm doling out my favorite shows, like so disciplined, like one, then turn it off because I want to make it.
Oh my God.
Yeah, I haven't finished Schitt's Creek because I've been on the last season since the last season started airing, and
That's the exact one I'm doing because I'm gonna cry when it's over.
I know you can start it over,
That's
but
true.
it still is just like you can't watch it for the first time again. And so I think I have like 3 episodes left and I'm doing like 1 a month at this point. Like it's
Alright.
just really glacial.
So
Um,
Emily, I have a message from Carly Ray. She says, "Hi, Emily. I'm tuning in from Indiana as well. Not a question, but wanted to let you know that the scene where Alex and Poppy talk about falling in love while working at Disney actually made me laugh out loud. Thanks for writing a book that quickly became an all-time favorite."
Oh, that's so nice. Thank you,
awesome.
Carly. Wow, that's great. Yeah, that's the kind of thing where it's like, I don't know where that came out of my brain, but it just did happen. And again, that's a hard thing to give someone writing advice when you're like, sometimes I just think of made up scenarios that are funny to me and then I write them into books.
Perfect. It's perfect.
So Madison Kahn says she thinks Mae Whitman would be a great
I
Poppy.
love Mae Whitman. And sadly, Mae Whitman's current show, Good Girls, just got canceled, I saw. So maybe she will be in the market for some upcoming roles. I think that could be very cute.
Okay, so
And then we have
beyond.
another question from
Oh.
Madison.
Okay.
Can you list some of the books that are a must read similar to People We Meet on Vacation?
Oh my gosh.
You know what? If you haven't read Mary Jane, Madison, have you read Mary Jane yet, Emily?
No.
By Jessica Anya Blau?
It's really
No.
good. I think
It's
you'd
really
like it.
good.
I need to
If you
read
like Emily's writing, you will really like that book.
Yeah.
Mary Jane. I will look that up.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, like these are the people to ask. Like they can sell you good books. I will also say the thing that comes to mind right away is when I'm feeling really just sort of like my mind is very boring, I like to read Christina Lauren novels because
I love her.
Yeah, they're so funny. And it just every time I'm reading them, it's like it just makes me want to write something funny, and it's really inspiring. And they're also like really like sexy and sweet and heart they pull at your heartstrings, but they're also just hilarious books. So I would say Josh and Hazel's Guide to Not Dating has sort of like an odd couple like Poppy and Alex.
Yeah, that would be a perfect book for people who like People We Meet on Vacation, because I've read all of her books. I binge read those all through the pandemic. I literally, you can ask Samantha, I read one after another.
That is how I was with Sherry Thomas's historical romance novels, and same with Tessa Dare. I just like had never read a historical romance novel in my life, and over the pandemic, it was just like the only thing that I could wrap my mind around, and I just was reading like one a day for a few weeks.
We do have a few more in the chat here. Bianca Rebello says, I was jogging in miserable heat at the park the other day, and a guy that looked exactly how I imagined Alex jogged past me, and I stopped in my tracks, and I'll try and tag y'all in the TikTok.
Did you get pictures? I'm like,
I know, Bianca, what's going on?
Was he making the sad puppy face?
Sad puppy face.
Yeah, seriously, if we can track this person down. I was hoping that where this was going was Bianca tripped this person to form a meet cute.
To do a meet cute. Skylar chimes in again, confirms that Gus is now going a little, the actor that we were talking about earlier is going a little gray now, like Gus. And then she also writes, I just read Beach Read again last night and stayed up until 5 a.m. and it was very worth it.
Oh, that's so nice. Wow. That's real love. That's real love to be able to reread a book overnight. Like I read books for the first time through the night pretty often, but I don't know if I've ever reread a book. That's a huge honor. Thank you.
I have to say that I am rereading this right now. I read it really early and then I went back and started reading it again 2 days ago, and I'm about 2/3 of the way done, and I can tell you I loved it as much as I loved it the first time.
Wow. Ultimate honor.
And I mean, there's still things that make me laugh when I read it, I mean, especially when they're in the Palm Springs apartment and they're trying to get it cooler. And you're just going,
Are you laughing from an air-conditioned room, I assume? Like instantly less funny when your apartment's really hot. I wonder how many people are
and you are
reading
also
it.
sweating. Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
Totally.
I wonder how many people are reading it in their like broken AC situations currently.
Yeah. Oh, there's another thing that popped up.
And then I have one after that.
Oh, so Bianca's letting us know more. My hands were sweaty and my phone wasn't reacting. But he was shirtless without a single drop of sweat on a 3-mile trail. Typical Alex.
Yeah, that's big Alex vibes right there. It's
That's
just
really
like,
funny.
why inhuman?
Spotted, and this was spotted in Houston. I love it.
Good
Thank
And
you.
then I got one
Great
on
story.
Facebook Live from Mons Bolanos. And she says, hey, Emily, I'm on here from Ann Arbor, Michigan. And not a question, but I just wanted to let you know I absolutely fell in love with your writing. Beach Read has become my favorite book of all time and is the first book I've ever read that I felt was written just for me. Also, thanks to your books, you made me realize I really want to study creative writing.
Awesome. That makes me so, that's also one of the very best compliments, I think. Is there are two that are some of my very favorites. I think I've said that about like 500 things tonight, but two that I have seen a lot that have just brought me so much joy. One is people telling me that they hadn't read romance before reading one of my books, and now they're reading romance, because I feel like when I remember that experience for me, when I found out I loved romance novels, it was just like life-changing, and just I had just suddenly so much more happiness in my life. And the other one is when people tell me that they got back into writing or they started writing, because I think writing about writers is a really good way to like let people know kind of like how accessible it really is. I think that information is often like hidden behind a wall, and it can feel like writers are off doing some lofty pursuit that you can't even imagine, when it's actually just usually sitting in front of your computer, like groaning to yourself, like in excruciating pain, just not able to write a single sentence. So I'm so happy that you're going to study creative writing. That will be normal. When you have that feeling, don't freak out and think that you're not good at writing. Everybody has that feeling. It's very normal.
Yeah.
So I wanted to ask you, did you always aspire to write both young adult and YA novels? Because I know you really made your mark in the YA realm first.
Yeah, I really didn't know what I would be writing. I think as a kid, I say as a kid, I mean in college, I think I thought that I would be writing fantasy novels. Honestly, that was sort of what I had read the most of at that point, was fantasy. And that was, really kind of blowing up in the YA space specifically. I feel like, Twilight created, YA already existed, but Twilight kind of boosted that category. And suddenly there was so much happening in that space and so many great books, and, just like book selling left and right. And not that I like made that decision because of that, but it was what I was reading a ton of. And so I think I felt like that was just what I would do. And, I was studying creative writing. And so I also was really interested in sort of like more literary, like science fiction and more literary fantasy, all of that. And I didn't really have like a voice, I don't think. I just knew what I was reading a lot of. And when I signed with an agent, it was actually for a fantasy novel, for a contemporary fantasy novel for teens. And I thought that that's where I would stay. And I hadn't written a book that was just set in our contemporary world without any like augmentation until Beach Read. That was the first time I had done that. And it was the first time since college that I had like written about adults. And in college I would sometimes like write what I thought was like good art because of what we were reading. So I would write about like middle-aged men who like were back from the war, and it's like stuff I had no connection to and no knowledge about, and just like was not doing myself any favors. But I wrote Beach Read really just for myself, and realized like, oh, I'm good at this. And it was just sort of like, oh, okay. So maybe sometimes you don't write what you exclusively read, or you don't exclusively write what you mostly read. And that was really big for me, just realizing like there is something inside of me, like there is a voice and a viewpoint, and that naturally does kind of want to come out. So none of it has been a conscious decision from the very beginning. It's always just sort of like I would have ideas that are usually sort of informed by what I've been reading a lot of and what I've been liking. And then I will try to write them. And sometimes it works out and sometimes it doesn't. And this, writing for adults, writing love stories for adults has just stuck, has just like made sense and worked for me. And I think it uses my inclination for dialogue really well, in a way that I think the YA did too, but I don't know. Yeah. I love giving these really long-winded answers and then realizing at the end of them that it was a yes or no question. So no, the answer is no. I did not know that I was like setting out to do this, but I do have this feeling now of like, I write pretty much everything. I don't publish everything because I write a lot of really bad books still, but I do want to publish just like a fantasy novel at some point. I do want to do some more literary sci-fi for adults. I have written horror before and hope to write horror again. And that's kind of a career no-no. I think is the official term for it, because, if people like your romance novels, that doesn't mean they want to read your horror novel. But eventually I really hope to just publish in every single genre that exists, because I read very widely and I like writing everything.
Yeah, what isn't that sort of a trope where the author like kills off a character or decides to, and then like, their biggest fan becomes crazy and
exactly. I mean, it's Misery.
Yeah, that's the one. I can remember.
Yeah.
What is that story? Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's a weird thing. It's a weird thing because I dedicated People We Meet on Vacation just like generally to my readers, because like this career is such a gift and I would not be doing it, and I would not be able to keep doing it if people hadn't supported me and like bought my books and read them and reviewed them and checked them out from the library and all of that. And having booksellers who are passionate and get them into people's hands, all of that is like a gift that adds up to me being able to have this job, which is magical and incredible. But it's also funny because bottom line, like I still am a person who's making the things that I'm excited about. And, publishing is a business, but writing is an art. And that's like a weird line to toe, where it's like you have to appreciate like your readership and you want to make them happy, but also like you get one life. So you have to make the thing that you want to make.
Yeah.
So Bernie Ray says, if you write a horror novel, trust that we will still read it.
Oh, that's great.
I'll add a love story on the side.
Why don't we ask
Now
one or
that
two
it's
more
gonna be fun
questions?
to do that. Ask for
And
more
then-
questions.
One or two more questions, and then we'll let Emily get back to, because I know it's very late where you are, isn't it?
It's 10:45, so on the late side, not
Oh
very
my
late, but a little
goodness.
late.
Thank you for staying up late for us.
Oh no, it's great. I mean, it just makes me feel like I'm on the West Coast, and that's always a good feeling.
Awesome.
Well, one thing that I noticed is the YA community has such a tight group of writers.
Mm-hmm.
Do you find that moves over to the romance writers?
Yeah. I mean, some of my very best friends are YA writers, but I have said from the beginning, like I've never met a nicer group of people than romance writers. It is like almost spooky, where you're just like, when do I find out that you like sacrifice virgins to demons to like get your talent or something? Because it is so, they're just uniformly nice. I haven't met, that they can be like snarky and funny and sassy, but they're like actually very kind, generous people. And that's something that was like just overwhelmingly obvious from the very beginning. And I think if anybody is trying to kind of break into that community and publish in that space, let that be comforting to you, that like you will not meet a nicer group of people, and they're so generous. And when I first was publishing Beach Read, I sort of expected, like I knew I was getting great publisher support and everything that kind of adds up to a book doing well usually. And I think I like braced myself for a feeling of like competition from other people, like other people being competitive or other people resenting, or I don't know. I just didn't know what to expect, like kind of coming into a new space and being like, this isn't my like turf, this is someone else's turf. And I just was amazed from very early on, all these kind of like romance powerhouses who really do take the time to read and blurb as many new authors as they can, and shout them out on social media and support them in any way they can and do events with them. And I just feel like it's like the most singularly generous group of people, and I never want to leave. I love the
Well, we have
romance.
one more question from Skylar Ochat.
Yeah.
She wants to know, what is your favorite romance book of all time?
Oh my gosh, that is going to kill me. Like my brain is just going to give up. Let me think about this. That's so hard. Anybody who wants to chime in the chat with their favorite romance books of all time, that's great, because we can all make
I'm still back on the earlier idea of a romance horror novel. I just think that's really, I want you to put a pin in that.
I will. That's Samantha's favorite romance novel, is my romance horror that doesn't exist.
Emily's unpublished romance horror is my favorite.
Yes, mine too. So my favorite historical romance novel, I can say immediately, because I've read so much less of it that it's still like fresh in my head. But I loved Sherry Thomas's Luckiest Lady in London, and I will say it was sort of like an initiation by fire. I can like type it into the chat too. Luckiest Lady in London by Sherry Thomas. Not on the Facebook chat, unfortunately, but I'll type it into this chat. I'll say it is sort of like an initiation by fire if you're not like a steamy romance reader, which I hadn't really read much like romance with like a high steam factor. And this book is just immediately like everybody is just really looking to get down and dirty from the beginning, but it's just so well written, and the characters are really, really complex in a surprising way to me, where it's like they're morally gray, but you really understand their motivations so early on. And it's just a really like, I don't know, it's just, I loved it. And it made me into a historical romance reader. I see somebody said November 9 by Colleen Hoover. Colleen Hoover is amazing. And The Hating Game by Sally Thorne is one of my all-time favorites. I will say that. I'm trying to think. Oh, this is, okay, for low steam, I have loved everything I've read by Vari McFarlane. I think her stuff, which I will type because it doesn't sound anything like it's said, because I think she's Irish, Scottish. I don't know. I'm sorry for not knowing. Okay. But
I have a cousin named Mari.
It's such a cool name. Like, yeah. But anyway, so she writes, like, I think it's shelved as women's fiction, but they always have a love story. And she does this thing that I've noticed in like every one of her books that I've read, where she writes these sort of like nice guy villains, where like the villains of these women's stories are sort of these men who fancy themselves like very like nice and upstanding, but they don't realize that they're actually awful in so many ways. But she writes these really sweet, swoony love stories, and I think she's hilarious. Like she makes me laugh aloud, which is kind of rare for me as a reader. So if you haven't read anything of hers, you should.
We've got one more comment here from Kat Jones.
Okay.
She said her favorites are People We Meet on Vacation, which we all agree. It ends with me. It ends with us, and The Hating Game.
Yes. So we've got more Colleen Hoover and Sally Thorne. Always, always, always good choices. Same thing with Christina Lauren. Kennedy Ryan is another writer I have started to read and have fallen in love with. She writes very complex love stories that are like really expansive. The characters have like full histories, and you're like, she knows these people better than I know myself. Like, this is incredible. I'll write her name too. So there are so many. I could not choose a favorite, but I love seeing other people's favorites. We also
Neha Patel wrote, she loved A Lady's Guide to Mischief and Mayhem by Amanda Collins.
Awesome. I've seen the cover for those, but I haven't read them, so I have to put them on my list.
What a good list.
Well, you guys, I think we've had an amazing evening. And Emily, thank you so much.
Thank you so much. This was really, really great. And I hope that someday we will do this in person again.
Absolutely, absolutely. And thank you everyone for chiming in. This is such a fun call. We have so many people from out of state, which is wonderful.
And we have the most people watching on Facebook that we've ever had for an event. So this is really exciting.
Thank you everyone for coming, and make sure you support this lovely bookstore.
And you can order any book that we've been discussing on our website at www.ggpbooks.com. And Emily, thank you so much.
Yeah,
This has been wonderful.
this is great.
Thank you. I really, really loved being a part of this, and we'll love to do it again soon. We'll make it happen.
Absolutely.
Okay.
All right.
Good night. Thank you,
Good
Emily.
night.